Hi everyone. So I'm proud to announce that finally I have finished my book, Spirit Calls Nature, and it is finally ready and you can find it on Amazon. And I must say that this was the most intellectually challenging work and research of my life. You know that I wrote already a book, 2 volumes on quantum physics, but well, these 2 books were also quite challenging, but this I think was even more difficult. But I think it was definitely worth it. And modesty aside, I know that it might sound a bit arrogant, and maybe it is, but considering how pseudosciences and all this pervasive quantum woo on the one hand, and also an equally pervasive narrow-minded and blind materialism, so-called physicalism, on the other hand, are both dominating our culture, I contend that, to the best of my knowledge, this is the most coherent and up-to-date scientific investigation that establishes a real bridge between consciousness and matter, Eastern and Western culture and philosophy, spirit and nature, more broadly speaking. By the way, the subtitle is Bridging Science and Spirituality, Consciousness and Evolution in a Synthesis of Knowledge. And nope, it's not about paranormal or parapsychological phenomena, no paranormal fantasies, or yet another pseudoscientific spiritualism, but statements based on peer-reviewed articles of mainstream journals, scientific peer-reviewed articles, and true introspective knowledge on the relation between science with philosophy and spirituality, as also evolutionary biology from a scientific and teleological perspective, and much more. Essentially, we might summarize the motivation of this book as trying to answer the question which asks if the universe is a purely material, deterministic mechanism with no agency, no freedom, no volition, no consciousness, no aim, and no purpose, as actually the physicalist science believes, why did it produce beings as us, or living organisms, having nevertheless this sense, or at least illusion, maybe, of agency, freedom, volition, consciousness, an aim, and this sense of a desire to act with a purpose? Why? How could this seeming contradiction come into existence? So let's see what's about by browsing through the content first of all.
So here I just browse through the first pages. Here's the content. You can have an impression of what's all about, and you can see that it is quite articulate content, and that puts together a lot of things, and where I finally, in the third part, make the so-called, what I call, the synthesis of knowledge. So the book is divided in 3 parts. The first part, entitled The End of the Curve of Reason, is more concerned with science, especially neuroscience and the so-called consciousness studies. Here you will find good reasons why the purely rational and analytic approaches to reality have their limits. We will discuss why neurosciences are approaching their limits of knowledge when it comes to the question of how and why the brain is supposed to produce consciousness and the mind, or why it does not produce consciousness at all, perhaps. And we will discuss also more generally the so-called mind-body problem of the philosophy of mind, or the so-called hard problem of consciousness. We will overview the recent findings on plants in intelligence and the so-called basal cognition of cellular organisms. And connected to this problem is also the long-standing problem if we have free will or whether it is an illusion, and show that the answer cannot be reduced to a simple yes or no dichotomy. The second part of the book I called the higher mind seeing and the first step towards a spiritual science. We'll discuss the classical philosophical idealism as a first step out of a purely rationalistic and materialistic mindset into a more intuitive way of looking at nature and reality. We will briefly make a fast overview of the phenomenon of quantum physics, what I call the weird world of quantum physics, and about which I have also written a couple of books that you can find with the same title. But here I make a quick summary, because quantum physics is de facto a scientific and a phenomenal world where idealistic conceptions can find their place and meaning in modern science. Philosophical idealism can give us a direction and a way of seeing things like quantum entanglement, quantum superposition, the strange and weird things that we know happen in the quantum microscopic world, and about which still until today lots of scientists and philosophers are questioning and are asking what the real correct interpretation is. We will make a fast, but I hope also an insightful survey of the ideas from the ancient Greece, such as Plato, Parmenides, to modernity, mentioning the deep insights of philosophers as scientists also, like Alfred North Whitehead, Henry Bergson, Tyler de Chardin, or John Jepser, just to mention some. And we will also begin to introduce some modern theories of some philosophers who are now turning back to some old theories about consciousness and the universe, which however are experiencing a return and a revival, such as panpsychism and the universal mind, or so-called universal consciousness. And this because precisely of the previously mentioned recent scientific findings that invite us to doubt, or at least be a bit more critical in regards to the idea that only an organism with a brain can show intelligent behavior, and who knows, have also some sort of primitive and elementary consciousness. Here I'm mainly speaking about cellular and plant consciousness. So this will motivate us then to take up also another way of seeing at reality. The new science, what I believe will be the new science, won't be so much about new discoveries, but about a new way of seeing reality and the nature and the world. We will in particular focus our attention on the approach of the German writer and natural philosopher Wolfgang von Goethe, who introduced a sort of archetypal way of seeing and a way of practicing science that might well unite the analytical with the intuitive understanding of the world. The third part, entitled A Synthesis of Knowledge, which I refrain to call the synthesis of knowledge, because I don't believe that there will be never a final and ultimate synthesis, but only a progressively integral point of view, And the one I'm proposing here is a suggestion, a proposal, a first step towards an integral science, not, of course, the final one. I have not such pretensions. But at any rate, why the first part was the more down-to-earth scientific analysis, the second part was more of a philosophical kind, this third part is the more spiritual one. It places in particular an emphasis on the spiritual cosmology of the Indian seer and poet Sri Aurobindo. And here we will discuss the spiritual evolutionary emergentism, where humans are envisaged only as a transitional being, evolving towards progressively higher states of consciousness. All nature, all matter, all physical laws, all life, and all mental aspects of our existence are ultimately the expression of a universal consciousness. This is a conclusion one must arrive if we take seriously also the first-person investigations of the mystics of all traditions. Then we become aware of the fact that the human reason, its analytical mind, is only one term of the ladder of consciousness. There are also higher states of consciousness we can reach and through which we can see the world in a much more comprehensive and integral way. There is not only matter but also more subtle realms, and evolution is not only a Darwinian process of natural selection and blind random mutations. This is only one aspect of evolution. This is true. The scientific and material one, this sort of vision of evolution is true, but evolution is also the expression of the emergence of a spirit in and through matter. Which means that there are also other planes and parts of being and existence other than our body and the pure materiality of things. If we take this perspective, a whole bunch of mysteries that previously seemed so enigmatic resolve or at least become more intelligible and begin to reveal its deeper nature and reason to be. Evolution, life, and mind find their place in the universal play of forces that apparently is so mechanic and mechanistic and deterministic and unconscious. But deep down, everything is a sort of super consciousness that has plunged itself in an involution and is now finding itself again through an evolution. In the last section, I analyzed some illusions and delusions of modernity, like the belief that computers will become conscious, or transhumanism that foresees a sort of hyper-technological future where man and machine will come together and hybridize in a new future, even more evolved being, and other mechanistic approaches to life, mind and body, and generally to our society. Because these will not lead us to a better future, I believe. The book claims that a technological, scientific, and eventually also trans-scientific future and trans-mental humanity, which embraces also our inner spiritual dimension, must come forward in humanity if we want to solve the long-standing problems and issues of humans' sufferance. But to do that, we will have, among other things, slowly but steadily progress towards also an ideal of human unity. At any rate, whatever we might think of these more spiritual interpretations of reality, it becomes clear that science, at least that science we consider nowadays, that is a purely third-person materialistic approach to phenomena like consciousness, mind, and evolution, is increasingly untenable. The book's bibliography contains almost 300 references, I think 285. So lots of it directs you to serious, peer-reviewed scientific papers and many other sources that clarify how science is inevitably going beyond its still strong, but in my view, crumbling materialism.
So I hope you will consider taking a look at this work. You can find the link in the description section below, because it is, in my humble opinion, the largest synthesis of knowledge to date, which synthesizes a scientific, philosophical and metaphysical overview of the relationship between science and spirituality, evolution and life, the nature of mind, consciousness and the brain, and much more. Overall, it is a 530 pages read, so it's quite a big book. And nevertheless, I promise you that if you will go through it until the end, you will see science, life, evolution, and reality as a whole from a much more integral perspective. So I hope you enjoyed. And last but not least, if you consider the book worth a mention, please then leave also a positive review. So far, thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you a good reading. Bye.